Imagine you are from the war-torn nation of Balinda, a country ravaged by ethnic conflicts, military tension, and where the police haven't even regained control of the city. It seems like there is no hope for Balinda and its people. But an unforeseen hero comes forth. Nepal puts a resolution to the UN to bring a peacekeeping force to Balinda. It's approved by a majority of the General Assembly, and it goes straight to the Security Council. All nations approve it, except... It seems like there are American mining companies, which have connections to Balindan rebels, and so they've lobbied the government, and they have vetoed the resolution. Or maybe it was Chinese mining companies. Who knows, and who cares? The point is, there will be no peace in Balinda. Balinda might not be real, but the UN's problems certainly are. Whether it's bringing peace to Balinda or de-escalating major conflicts in the world today, it seems like the poor UN just can't do anything right. So why is this? In this video, I'll be going over one of the many reasons why the UN is so seemingly incapable, and that is its very unfortunate structure. But then at the end of this video, I'll go into what the UN does do right to give it some credit where credit is due. So why is the UN structure such a problem? Well, one of the major reasons is veto powers. As we saw in the great tragedy of Balinda, all it takes is one veto from a Security Council member to completely stop a resolution. And while the self-servingness of the Balindan mining conglomerates is an extreme example, selfish activities like this take place every day. For example, after Russia's 2014 annexation of Crimea, the UN considered a resolution to condemn the actions. But Russia vetoed it. I don't think I need to explain why they may have been, biased. Now, we also saw this recently with the American veto of the Israeli-Palestinian ceasefire resolution last year. From a certain political perspective, it could be viewed that it is in the American interest to prolong the war for the time being, because it allows Israel to assert itself in the region, and Israel is a very close ally of America. Now, from this perspective, the U.S. is working directly against maintaining peace and security, which at its founding was the purpose of the UN, using the veto mechanisms of the UN. The issue with giving veto powers to countries from every major political sphere on Earth is that the UN can't effectively solve problems in any of them. Basically,
when everyone's super, no one will be.
When the UN wants to make a resolution on Russia, Russia vetoes it. When the UN wants to make a resolution on Israel, America vetoes it. It's a situation where, because all the spheres have power in the UN has no power over any of the spheres. But then the question is, what do we actually do to fix this? Obviously, we can't get rid of Russia or get rid of America from the Security Council, but if we got rid of the veto altogether, got rid of the Security Council, then this would leave it up to the General Assembly to make decisions. And the way the General Assembly works is that it passes votes via majority. So this would turn politics into a giant popularity contest where everyone's just trying to get the majority by whatever means necessary. One second. Look, the UN's cool and whatever, but you know what's even more important? Please like and subscribe to the Confilipados YouTube channel. 1 like equals 1 platoon of peacekeepers for Balinda. Thank you. Then on the complete other side are people like Joe Biden, who suggest adding more countries to the Security Council. Now this would make the whole problem even worse, because every resolution would be subject to be vetoed by an even greater number of countries with an even greater number of conflicting interests. And the thing is, having a bigger Security Council and having more decentralized power among more countries generally, would be more representative of the world today, but it would be even harder to get resolutions done for places like Balinda. And then, the UN is kind of thought of as being the worst of both worlds, where on one hand, it's elitist, bureaucratic, and opaque, and then it's also thought of as overly democratic and dragged down by the conflicting interests of its constituent parts. And then there's also plenty of other issues, obviously, as to why the UN can be so ineffective. One of the main ones is enforcement. Even when a resolution can be agreed upon, oftentimes there's not troops with quality training, quality equipment, and quality funding, and to make sure that peacekeeping can happen effectively. And then in the same light, there's the issue of implementation, which is when a resolution can be agreed upon, there's troops in a country, oftentimes there's political issues. For example, in Mali recently, a new military government took power, and they asked all the peacekeepers to leave. And they did this so that they could bring in Russian Wagner Company forces to fill the gap, which is a symbolic political move for the new government, but then also diminishes the effectiveness of the UN. But look, it's not going to be all negativity all the time. Sometimes you have to look on the bright side. So what does the UN do really well? The UN works really well on issues where everyone agrees. I know that this is mind-blowing stuff, but since one of the main issues of the UN is its diversity of thought, when there's no diversity of thought on an issue, problems get solved very effectively. For example, global hunger. Obviously, it still exists, but thanks to the UN, 90 million people every year are given food who wouldn't be. It is literally impossible for the human brain to comprehend how many people that is. That's like every single person in California being fed multiple times over. The UN's impressive human rights achievements highlight something about its character, which is that it basically has two very distinct responsibilities: to police global affairs and to provide for people in extremely difficult situations. And to police effectively, the UN would need decisive decision-making and strong authority to act on. And if it had either of those, then that would involve violating the sovereignty of its constituent parts. Populist politicians already weaponize anxiety effectively around international organizations encroaching on the rights of individual states, and the more centralized authority is, and the more authority the UN independently has to act on, the worse these problems would be. So it's for that reason that I believe the UN should mostly just stick to what it's good at, which is the humanitarian stuff. The UN cannot police effectively. That is not its job. It cannot be its job. And so I think, feeding people, preventing disease, if that's what it does well, then it should just stick to them. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like my content, then please check out my last video, Why Won't China Just Collapse Already? Which is about why, despite being authoritarian, China has maintained stability and peace throughout the decades. And, of course, subscribe, and do not forget 1 like equals 1 peacekeeping platoon in Balinda. Thank you.